welcome to episode 3 of Give a Fuck, a podcast presented by Spark Consciousness. My name is Sarah Woodard and I am your host. Among other things, I am a certified shamanic practitioner, Reiki master teacher, activist, educator, speaker, and award-winning children's author. I am also a fierce defender of the underdog, which for me means wildlife, companion, and work/farmed animals, Mother Nature, and Gaia herself. I care deeply about my fellow human animals and believe that when we learn to live in harmony with nature, we also live to learn in harmony with ourselves and each other. I am fearless about doing my own inner work and growth and am passionate about helping create a world where all beings are respected and honored. I have a deep connection to Gaia and feel particularly connected in the presence of the beautiful Colorado Front Range. When I am not busy working to present information about living in harmony with Mother Nature, I share my time with 3 wonderful cats, enjoy bird watching, and experiencing all the outdoors has to offer. My life journey to this point has been filled with twists, turns, and changes, as is everyone's. For me, the constants from birth to now are a strong connection to Gaia, a deep-seated need to serve and help create a more compassionate and healthy world, and a love of both learning and sharing my knowledge. Those lifelong constants are what brought me to this point. All of the knowledge I've acquired in the process of learning to live my life in harmony, as well as the new information I come across, are the inspiration for and knowledge bombs in this podcast. Through connection to nature, I help young millennial women and others feeling lost expand their knowledge, feel connected to the world around them, and live with greater compassion. The show is to provide some fun facts or tips or what I call knowledge bombs and sometimes other resources to help kickstart your learning process. Please remember that Give a Fuck is spelled F*K if you're trying to search for it on any of your favorite podcast apps. The format for this show, as always, will be this introduction and then a quick life update, the satan of the show, and then a quick wrap up and housekeeping. So actually for today's life update, I wanted to circle back to last episode where I was talking about inclusion varnishing, specifically really involving this time of year and the winter holidays and how people say holidays, but they're not actually talking about more than any holiday other than Christmas, or displaying decorations that are anything other than Christmas, even if they're well-intentioned. That actually wound up being some really great, powerful conversations over the past couple of weeks, and I wanted to share that with you really quickly. So the first is the apartment complex where I live, they have, like that office area where the community manager sits and little lobby space and whatever, and I knew when I walked in there what I was going to see, but I did it anyway. And sure enough, they weren't overtly Christmas. There was a Santa, but it wasn't like a huge Santa. There wasn't a huge tree, but it was still very overtly Christmas. It was poinsettias, which are red and green and are only available at Christmas time. There was, Christmas lights. There was a small Santa, and there was a candle that literally smelled like Christmas. And I don't have a problem with any of that, but I once again felt left out. And so I asked our community manager if she could perhaps add some Hanukkah decor. And her response at first was a little and I kind of talked her around to saying, well, I'll think about it. Which in my mind always meant no, because whenever my parents wanted to say no, they just said, I'll think about it, because they didn't really have the boundaries to be able to say no. So my back was up for about 24 hours. And there was like, what else was I going to do? But then I got an email from her saying, hey, Sarah, I got approval to put some Hanukkah decor in the lobby. Which of these Hanukkah menorahs that I found on Amazon do you like? So I picked one out, and I was so grateful that I actually walked over to see her and gave her a copy of that book that I referenced in the last podcast, Batia's Lunch. And we wound up having this really beautiful conversation about how, she genuinely thought that decor was just the time of year, winter holidays, whatever. And when I really got to explain it to her, she was like, wow, I never thought about that. And I was like, yeah, why would you? I said, when your holiday is already included, you don't always see what's not included, right? And I said, but even if I move, like, hopefully now I've made things better for any other Jewish people that live here now or in the future and might not feel comfortable saying something. And it wound up being this really beautiful conversation. And then a few days later, I went to go see my acupuncturist, and I know she's very mindful, and she presents as somebody who genuinely tries to be inclusive, but doesn't always know how, nor does anyone always know how, right? And I was telling her about this conversation at my apartment building, and she's like, yeah, I wanted to talk to you about this. What do you think about what I did in the waiting area? And I said, I get that you were trying not to be super Christmas, but it is Christmas. She had Christmas lights it wasn't around, and it was in her, she has like a fir tree out there. I'm like, that's a Christmas tree, honey. Like, we don't do that for Hanukkah. She's like, no, I guess you don't. And I said, the poinsettias are beautiful, but they're red and they're green. She says, well, what should I do? And I said, you don't have to go super religious and put up a menorah. Just find some dreidels. And I gave her the whole history of the dreidel game and how it's actually more than a game. It was actually a way for Jews to protect themselves while they were studying and being in their religion. And the bad dudes, pick a time in history, bad dudes, would march into town to try to hurt them. And so they could put their study materials, their Hebrew materials away, and they would pull out dreidels. And it would look like they were playing a game rather than doing something subversive that they weren't supposed to do. And I said, you could put that, you could put the story out there. You could put out, the directions, and people could play the dreidel game while they're waiting. I said, that would be a super fun and educational thing. She says, yeah, but what about all the other holidays? I said, I hear you. If you're going to include one, you should include them all. But also think about your demographic of who's coming in this building. Do you have people who celebrate Kwanzaa coming in this building? If you don't need to worry about it. If you do, ask them what they might like to see. She's like, oh, okay, I can do that. She's like, but it's so much work. I said, well, if it's so much work, then don't do anything. Then you don't have to worry about being inclusive or not, because you're just saying, I'm doing nothing. So it wound up being this really great conversation. And I wanted to share all of that with you because A, I wanted to give you some closure, but B, I also wanted you to realize that you can speak up and you can make a difference when you say something if you approach it in a polite way, right? Like if I had gone into either of them and I was just pissed off the way that I was venting on the podcast, it wouldn't have gone so well. But if you work through your emotions first and then you have that conversation, it can go really well. So I wanted to share that with you, and shout outs to both of them for being amazing. Okay, so for the Seitan today, I actually have a really cool thing to share with you guys. So I always talk about how, we should be listening to Earth, to nature, because there's so much that we can learn, and all of that is true. But I found this amazing article from not that long ago. It was just back from November 13th, about how Earth is also listening all the time. And it's pretty incredible. So the article, I'm going to link to it in the show notes for you, of course. But so it's actually talking specifically about fungi, so mushrooms, and how they are literally the first thing that grows, and they also are the last piece of the life cycle because they compost everything back into the ecosystem. So they're super important, even though mushrooms, who cares, right? But they're actually super, super important to our ecosystem. And so this study that they did with mushrooms in the early 2000s, there was actually a series of them. They discovered this really cool thing. Mushrooms, although they have 0 ears or auditory organs, actually respond to sound. High frequencies actually inhibit their growth, and low frequency sound waves actually stimulate their growth. And so they actually figured out that during and they've known for a while that mushrooms seem more likely to be hit by lightning than other plants, and there's a reason for this. And so the low sound waves of the thunder tell the mushrooms, oh, get ready, because they need a lot of water to grow, right? And so the low sounds of the thunder, they're like, okay, get ready. And when they start vibrating because they're getting ready to grow, the lightning is actually attracted to them, and that electricity helps stimulate their growth process. It's pretty cool how that, like, nature just does all that, right? We didn't have to do anything with that. Nature did that all by itself. So it's pretty amazing. And so, this got me really thinking, like, everything has a vibrations, right? Thunder, music, everything, like, everything has a vibration. And quantum physicists will tell you that everything vibrates. The desk, that my computer is sitting on, the chair you're sitting on, everything vibrates. Everything. And so the vibrations are obviously vital to, like, how nature works with itself. But we as humans, like, we can, as I always say, we can learn to listen to nature. But I don't just mean that in, like, a metaphysical way. I mean in, like, a very literal way. We can learn to listen to what nature is saying, and if not communicate per se, at least, like, understand what's being asked of us, understand what we need to do to be more harmonious with the planet, with ourselves, with, all the other animals on the planet. And I think this is pretty amazing. I am not a scientist by any means. I don't know for sure, like, how we could do that. But I do remember, I meant to look this up and I forgot, but I think it was that sci-fi movie, Strange Encounters of the Third Kind, or something along those lines. If somebody knows the exact movie, please feel free to message me on social media and let me know. But I think that was the name of it, where the concept of the movie was that, like, aliens were coming to Earth and we were trying to figure out how to communicate with them. And ultimately, what we wound up doing was using music to communicate, because vibrations are a universal language. Like, people say math is a universal language. Being a math dunce, I disagree. But sound, like, even if you're not a musician, even if you're tone deaf, you can still feel the emotion in sound. Right? That's why every TV show, every movie has a soundtrack. Even people who have lost their hearing or were born without the same type of hearing that you and I have, they can put their hands or whatever on a speaker if they turn up the music loud enough, and they can feel the vibrations, and they can understand what is trying to be conveyed with that music through the vibrations. So this whole thing, I don't even really know, like, it feels like there's so many possibilities with it. Like, we could potentially learn to actually use sound and vibrations and music to actually have a conversation with plants, with animals, with the earth herself. Obviously, we're a long way from that, but I think that the possibility of that is so amazing and so cool. But in the meantime, until science figures that out, there's also things you individually could do at home, right? I'm always a big advocate of developing some sort of a spiritual practice. And so, to be clear, a spiritual practice fits into any religious belief you already have. And you also do not have to have a religious belief or even believe in God to have a spiritual practice. A spiritual practice is really just about navigating your way back to your own self. And it can look like many different things. It could be meditation. It could be forest bathing. It could be sound healing. Whatever, it's really about what works for you in your life. And really the only requirement is that it brings you joy and helps you heal. That's it. And obviously, let's not hurt others in the process, right? That should go without saying, but just in case. So when I feel like when you tap into that spiritual practice, whatever it winds up being, you're tapping into that vibration, right? Or all of those vibrations, and you learn to understand what they mean coming at you, right? So, like, for me, like, I have training as a Reiki master teacher and training in shamanism. And with Reiki specifically, like they actually do what they call an attunement with every level of it, which changes the vibration of your body. And you do start to feel vibrations around you differently. It's also what I call like your gut instinct, right? Like even if you're not super in tune, like you could walk into a room and you're like, whoa, like there was such, people in here were just fighting and they stopped because I walked in the room or whatever, right? Or, whoa, we could cut the tension in here with a knife, right? That's because of the vibrations that you're feeling. And when you learn to work with those and pick up on what they mean and what they're trying to tell you about your daily life and how you're living and what decisions you're trying to make, you start to do so in a way that's more aligned with the planet and the universe and therefore your life and your mission and your purpose. These vibrations are super cool. And I love that there's now science that's looking at them. Quantum physics, yes, and that's been doing it for a while, but also this study with mushrooms. I think it's pretty amazing that this is all happening around us and we're not even aware of it, right? I mean, did you know before today that mushrooms responded to thunder? I didn't. And I think that's pretty cool. So, I hope you will read the article and continue to investigate any and all of this vibration stuff that struck you. For now, I'm going to move on to housekeeping, but please do let me know if you stumble on anything else cool like that. You can always DM me on social media. So speaking of that, on social media, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, and LinkedIn. And with the exception of LinkedIn, my username on all of those is Spark Consciousness. I would love to encourage you to sign up for the waiting list for my online course if you want to learn more about how to live in harmony with nature. There will be a link for that in the show notes as well. I'm also, as I've mentioned, going to be coming out with a digital magazine in October of next year, so more on that later. Again, I don't know what the next show is going to be because, don't know. Surprise. I hope you like surprises because chances are most of the time I'm not going to know what's coming up for the next one. I can say that as far as, the what is going on in my life and business updates, I have started working with an email marketing coach who's amazing. Thank you, Allie. I've also started working with a YouTube coach named Jennifer. She's over in the UK and she is fabulous. Working on recording the videos for the online course. That's going to be happening very soon. I've been practicing with the teleprompter. Let me just tell you, that's a trip. It's actually not as hard as I was led to believe it was going to be, but it's definitely a little bit different. And yeah, I think that's about all that's going on. You know what? I did find, so there's something that happens in Colorado, and I don't know if it happens everywhere, called frozen waterfalls. And I guess what happens is when the falls come down the rocks, like it doesn't happen for ones that don't touch rocks, but for falls that touch rocks, apparently the rocks get cold enough that the water freezes, and so you wind up with a frozen waterfall. And there's a bunch of them in Colorado that you can go, some people will hike and climb, like with a pickaxe. That is not me, but I'm planning some adventures to go at least look at them and hike out to them and take pictures and go, oh, so pretty. So that's on my list of adventures that I'm planning. Yeah. All right. I think that is officially it. So if you have any other topic ideas or anything else, like I said, just DM me on social media. Otherwise, have a great couple of weeks and continue to expand your knowledge, feel the connections, and live with compassion.